Akhir Oktober lalu, pemerintah resmi meluncurkan program Tropical Landscape Finance Facility atau TLFF. Melalui pendanaan jangka panjang 10-15 tahun, pengadaan bunga rendah disertai dengan dana bantuan, kehadiran TLFF diharapkan mampu memberikan keuntungan berkelanjutan bagi petani skala kecil di tanah air. TLFF merupakan inisiatif swasta kepada swasta untuk fasilitas pinjaman sebesar 1 miliar dolar Amerika atau 13 triliun rupiah dan fasilitas bantuan sebesar 100 juta dolar Amerika atau 1,3 triliun rupiah. Beberapa program yang bisa mendapat fasilitas pendanaan ini diantaranya pengurangan ekspansi hutan, akses terhadap energi baru terbarukan, serta restorasi lahan. Hal ini dinyatakan Menteri Lingkungan Hidup dan Kehutanan Siti Nurbaya di Istana Wakil Presiden Rabu siang.
TLFF menjadi satu bagian penting karena menurut Pak Erik, international support itu paling efektif kalau dikaitkan dengan private activities, jadi private companies. Apalagi memang kalau kita lihat ya, perizinan di kawasan hutan itu swasta kita udah mengcover hampir 34 juta hektar ya.
Pemerintah berharap program TLFF bisa meningkatkan produktivitas dan taraf hidup petani skala kecil.
Kalau Pak Wapres sih, juga Bapak Presiden, dua beliau itu saya kira sungguh-sungguh leader ya, kalau dari aspek lingkungan. Dan beliau sangat memahami bahwa situasi lingkungan kita sangat berat.
Saat bertemu Wakil Presiden, Siti Nurbaya didampingi Direktur Eksekutif UNEP, Erik Solheim. Vina Simanjuntak, Jakarta.
Ya, Indonesia sebagai salah satu negara yang memproduksi emisi terbesar di dunia kini berambisi untuk mengurangi jumlah emisinya. Pada tahun 2020 diharapkan bisa mengurangi jumlah emisi sebesar 26%, sementara pada 2030 sebesar 29%. Dan bila ada bantuan internasional, diharapkan bisa mengurangi emisi sebesar 42%. Nah, baru-baru ini juga Indonesia telah meratifikasi Paris Agreement ya, dan pada tanggal 4 November lalu juga dunia telah mulai mengimplementasikan Paris Agreement. Nah, bagaimana persetujuan Paris ini akan diimplementasi, karena ini merupakan di bawah payung PBB. Hari ini kita akan membahasnya bersama Eksekutif Direktur dari United Nations Environmental Program, Erik Solheim, yang saat ini sedang berada di Indonesia. Erik, thank you for being with us and welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm always happy to be in Indonesia.
Indonesia, yes. And well, tell us a little bit about your visit, and who are you seeing and what kind of programs are you focusing at this particular moment, particularly with Indonesia as your partner?
Well, we are meeting Vice President Kalla, a number of ministers. We had a huge roundtable of the main actors in the palm oil and the paper business. We are seeing parliamentarians, and we were at the launching of the new tropical landscapes
the
finance facility, which is a huge opportunity for Indonesia to really require more international finance for its climate and environment transformation.
Tell me a little bit more about the tropical landscape financial facilities. What is it exactly? How does it work? And what does it mean, particularly for the Indonesian farmers or people who are affected by the financing facility?
This is the first big opportunity for Indonesia to attract big finance. And it's trying to resolve the problem that the big banks and insurance companies, those with the money in the world, they have any amount of money. They are averse with money. They don't really know where to put the money. On the other hand, small-scale farmers in Sumatra or Kalimantan, they need investment, but these do not match. How to bring the big money from the big banks to invest in the small-scale farmers so that they can increase the productivity, That's what we want to achieve with this, and let's hope we can do this.
Can you perhaps tell us a little bit, how does it actually work? And farmers, do they have to apply individually? And then in terms of the accountability of it and the oversight, how will it work, particularly under the umbrella of the UNEP?
The money will come from big financial institutions, ADM Capital in Hong Kong, Paribas in French base, which is one of the biggest banks, and from other financial institutions. There is a secretariat run by UN Environment, and we're partnering with any number of other institutions. The farmers will get the money through non-governmental organizations or from collective of farmers. And for
with very low interest, presumably, or no interest.
The idea is, of course, that the interest rate should be much lower, and the loan should be much longer than they can get in normal. Because if you want to transform your palm oil business into more sustainable, more productive, you need a long-term loan. Maybe you even need to replant. There will be a few years where you cannot get an income. You cannot do that unless the loan is long-term. And the interest rate, we hope, will be half of what you can get in the normal capital market.
And then how much, in terms of the amount of this financing facility, are we talking about? And for how many farmers, at the end of the day, that will be able to have access to this financing scheme?
Well, we are at the start, but we believe that if this is successful, we are speaking about hundreds of millions of American dollars, which is a huge amount, maybe up to $1 billion. So it's huge if it's successful. But of course, you cannot build that in one day, build it gradually. But the idea is for the farmer in Sumatra, Kalimantan, Java, Papua, wherever he or she is, to invest in more so that the palm oil or rubber or other business can be more productive. You see that the most successful farmers are at least 3 times as productive as the least successful. So if those with the lowest productivity can invest more in their farm, they can get a lot more income from that farm, which of course also make it possible to stop any kind of encroachment on the forest and destruction of forest or peatlands.
And obviously doing it, doing farming sustainably and then, in keeping with the environmental needs. So that would be a very important element of it, surely.
Absolutely, that will be part of it, that you give advice as to what is sustainable long-term way of farming, which is in accordance with the best of ecological principles in the world.
Yeah. Eric, Indonesia, especially last year, we've seen with the forest fires, and mainly it's a combination of, we had the El Nino and we also had the peat burning, and Indonesia is one of the sort of guilty of emitting carbon in a quite huge amount. The government is now very committed to cutting down the emission, and one of the things that they've decided is to have a moratorium on peat degradation. And just your thoughts on Indonesia's efforts to actually reduce carbon emission through these types of activities and policies by the government.
What you now see in Indonesia, in my view, is a very dedicated government who really want to make the change. You also see that all the big industrial players, the big palm oil companies and the big paper and pulp companies, all of them have given a zero deforestation promise. They said, we will not destroy any more forest or any more peatlands. Still, we all know that destruction is happening on the ground. So how can we get this stopped? And I think there are 2 main elements. The government must implement the laws of the land. It's now illegal to destroy the peatlands, so that must be stopped. On the other hand, the government can only stop that if at the same time you give economic incentives to the farmers so that they can make a better profit and more prosperity from the already degraded land. But if you do both, implement the law and provide prosperity, I think Indonesia can be a really inspiring global example as to how you resolve the big issues of the day.
But what do you see as Indonesia's biggest obstacles when it comes to sort of implementing these actual, programs? I mean, we've seen how it's not for lack of international interest or donation. I mean, we've had the $1 billion pledged by Norway, for example, for our REDD+ activities. But what do you see now as still Indonesia's biggest challenge when it comes to promoting these activities that are environmentally sound?
Biggest problem in one word is implementation. Parliament of Indonesia is passing very good laws. You have a president and a government who really want to implement these laws, and you have companies who have made the pledge that they want to change, and I'm absolutely certain that the leaders of the companies want the change to happen. But still, to get that implemented on the ground is the challenge. I mean, some of our colleagues from UN Environment just yesterday was to Central Kalimantan, where you see very good projects, but you also see just behind the scene the destruction of the peatland, which is now illegal. It's actually happening. So implementing the laws, that's the number one challenge.
And then number two, then number three at the end of the day. I mean, there's no point in having good, targets and commitment without implementation.
I think the challenge number one is implementation,
Yeah.
challenge number two is implementation, and challenge number three is
and so on
implementation.
and so on and so forth. But there's always this sort of argument that, okay, we have these very ambitious targets to reduce our emission, but at the same time, we also have an ambitious target to increase our growth, our GDP. And do you see that the two targets are beginning to sort of merge into one, or is there still different pull factors when it comes to, okay, let's focus on economic development, but perhaps at the expense of our sustainably green economy, so to speak, particularly for Indonesia?
That was the wrong thinking of the past, not just in Indonesia, but globally. You saw environment as a cost. Oh, it's so costly to protect the environment. The modern thinking, which we see now taking root nearly everywhere, no, this is an enormous business opportunity. It's an opportunity for the farmer to be more productive, taking better care of the land, while at the same time stopping the deforestation, and for companies to make profit, provide jobs in the new green economy. So it's not a cost, it's an enormous opportunity. And if we look to the big picture, if Indonesia can really stop the destruction of the peatlands and stop deforestation, it's an enormous health gain. The pollution from this is causing problems for so many people, not just in Indonesia, but in other nations. It's an enormous service to environment. You protect for the orangutan, one of the most spectacular species on the planet, and it's very good for global climate. Health, biodiversity, and climate, 3 birds killed with 1 stone. Maybe not the right environment expression, but still 3 birds killed with 1 stone.
But are you optimistic that Indonesia can achieve its target at the end of the day, reducing emission by 29% in 2030 and up to 41 or 42% through international help by 2030? I mean, are these targets too ambitious or achievable?
No, I think we see change now coming so rapidly. It's happening much faster in the world than people thought was possible. Price of solar energy is dropping at a speed no one thought possible. Just last week in southern India, they opened the biggest solar plant anywhere in the world. It will power 150,000 households in the southern Indian state of Tamil Nadu. Same week, China had the financial close of a wind farm in the Fujian province, up to $1 billion. So we see these new inspiring technologies coming so fast. This week I was visiting the Chinese city of Shenzhen, which is one of the most modern cities of China. There you have the company, which is the biggest company in the world in storage technology, biggest in electrical vehicles, bigger than the American Tesla, which is more well known, and which now will make monorails, which is much cheaper than metros. It should be an inspiring example also for cities in Indonesia, where you can resolve transport problems in cities by the most modern technology. So the opportunity for change and for new businesses and for new jobs is fantastic.
But we also see the ice caps melting at a much more rapid pace than we thought that, you know, it was going to happen. I mean, we've seen sort of the amount of optimism, you know, in the Paris Agreement, and as of the 4th of November, everybody seems to be very excited. But then come the 9th of November, we have the results from the US elections, and then it's, you know, the US might be sort of, you know, the black factor in this. I mean, how optimistic are you that Paris Agreement will be, you know, able to be implemented on a global scale?
But this is obviously the race. On one hand, we see rapid negative climate changes every day, and in the Arctic and the Antarctica, as you said, I mean, ice is melting at the speed that no one thought was possible. At the same time, we also see the technological change we need to make happening much faster than people thought was possible. Private sector is very often a driver of this, and I'm very optimistic that our ability to change. I mean, humankind has resolved enormous problems in the past. If we come together to resolve them, there's no limit to what we can achieve.
So you're still optimistic even under the Trump presidency that, you know, he's obviously, you know, the kind of message, at least I don't know about the implementation, but the message that we've had coming from him, and you know, the potential of his team being sort of climate change deniers, if anything, surely that would put sort of slow things down a little bit, especially with the US being one of the most largest emitters of carbon in the world.
Obviously, it's worrying when you have lead politicians in the most advanced nation on the planet, like the United States, who don't believe in science. I mean, how can you not believe in science? I mean,
well, it happened.
Science has brought us to the moon. Science can cure cancer and prevent diseases. How can you say, oh, science can bring us to the moon, science can cure cancer, but oh, I decide not to believe in climate science? You cannot pick the science you want. Science is not up for election. Science is the best ability of humanity to transform our society. So let's believe in science. Let's judge Donald Trump and the United States on what they do, not what they have said in the election campaign.
But then what is the worst thing that could happen? Say, for example, I mean, as far as I know, he's chosen somebody to head the EPA, someone from, you know, the fossil fuel sort of lobby. That surely would have some kind of a negative impact on this climate change, you know, spirit that everyone is really wanting to implement.
The reason why I'm optimistic still with this, I mean, let's assume that Trump and the United States were to follow the worst of the policies they have so far advocated. I am not sure they will. There's also a number of signals that they may have a more modern view, but let's assume that they take the most ridiculous negative view. Well, still, huge part of the United States will not be in agreement with that. California will not stop moving on climate, even if the White House don't. All the most modern American companies, the Googles, the Microsoft, the Facebook of this world, all of them are adamant to move on environment issues. Google will be 100% renewable very soon. Even the huge companies in the United States who are not in the renewable sector, the Walmart is an enormous company, and they are rapidly moving towards renewable, putting up solar everywhere. So the private sector in the United States and the most modern states like California will move, whatever happens in the White House. But adding to that, of course, China is now emerging at the world scene for the first time in modern times as a global leader. China has developed very fast, but for many years it did not really take the global scene as a leader. Now we see China taking leadership in the ratifying the Paris Agreement. China took leadership in the Kigali Protocol, which was fantastic success. And China is curbing pollution back home at the speed again.
Well, they need to. I mean,
they need to, for sure.
It's a question of survival for China. I mean, the amount of pollution that they emit.
So absolutely confident that China will do it, because President Xi Jinping of China is not doing it for the United States. He's doing it because he wants to provide a much better life for the Chinese, And of course, because there is a strong desire from everyone living in Beijing, Shanghai, all the big cities of China to see this change happening. So it will happen, whatever happens in the US.
No, it's interesting. So in terms of leadership, when it comes to implementing some of these targets, the corporations, especially international or global corporations, play a big part. Yeah, and you see that this willingness is something that global corporations are really committed.
Many global corporations are now far ahead of politicians. French oil company Total, I mean, you will not expect this from an oil company, has said that they will be one of the 3 biggest players in the solar industry by 2030. And they said we will not drill in the Arctic because we believe in climate science. Well, these are brave statements from an oil company. Unilever and Nestlé, 2 of the biggest players in the food consumption industries, are well ahead of nearly all political leaders. They have put their own the total economies in these big corporations for a sustainability test. But if you move to Asia, of course, I mean, all the big players in the palm oil and the paper business of Indonesia or Southeast Asia, the Wilmars, the Asian paper and pulp, all of these, the April, all of these have made a clear pledge of serious deforestation. They need to implement it, but it's on the way. And if you go to China, there is any number of companies now really moving into this space of modernity.
And also the consumers are demanding for more sort of environmentally friendly products. I mean, what do you see as the role of a consumer in this aspect, especially Indonesia recently? For the first time, we are selling, licensed timber to the EU. So there's that progress because of, perhaps, people are much more, they don't want to buy timber that is not ethically sourced, or they don't want to, buy goods that are not environmentally friendly. So the role of the consumers in pushing this.
Green consumer is one of the main drivers of change. And you don't need all consumers to be green. I mean, not all will. But if, say, 1 out of 5 consumers are green and demanding timber which is certified, demanding palm oil which is certified, and where you're certain this is respected, well, that's driving the change, because no company will want to be outside that market. So the ethical green consumer can have an enormous impact on markets. Then some companies will be leading in the transformation, and the rest will follow.
And the nationally determined, the NDIC that, we see that each country, they have their pledge, and this is what they, they want, their target, and then this is what they plan to do. How to keep a tab on all these nationally determined intentions, and what's the mechanism? How does it work?
And the time where you can really cheat, basically is a time of the past, because we are living in transparent society, where what happens is clearly visible. But the main shift is the change in business. When business see this as an opportunity, we are where we want to go. I mean, in Copenhagen in 2009, most businesses took the view that, it's so costly to do something with climate. And then we pushed the bill to someone else. Now, so many businesses see this as an enormous opportunity for new, interesting, better paid, more fascinating jobs, green jobs, and they want to change.
Can we keep the temperature, the increase below 2 degrees by the end of the century, Eric? I mean,
yes, we can. That's a good slogan. Yes, we can. We can. But we can only do it if we really make this economic transformation happening. It must happen now. We cannot wait. We cannot wait 5 or 10 years for this to happen, which will be to phase out coal, moving to solar, wind, hydro, all the other energies, to move into better transport systems in the cities, to introduce electrical vehicles. We need and to change the food production systems, and of course to protect the forests, because then a lot of the emissions are coming from forest degradation, and that can be stopped. And in many nations we can also reforest, which is a positive contribution to the climate account.
Tell me a little bit about the programs and the type of projects that UNEP, particularly prioritize. Share with us some of them, and what do you see as in the next couple of years the main priorities, particularly when, I mean, we've just had natural disasters are becoming very common, for example, and even here in Jakarta, we are sinking every year. Jakarta is actually sinking up to, from 6 centimeters to 12 centimeters. So these are real problems that we are facing. How do you prioritize in sort of mitigating some of these problems?
In UN Environment, and we want to speak about UN Environment, because it's easy for people out there to understand, and all these difficult acronyms we tend to use in the UN system. We want to prioritize pollution. And the reason for that is that what you want to do to fight pollution in Jakarta or Surabaya or Medan or wherever, Bandung, whatever big city in Indonesia, will basically be the same which you want to do to fight climate. But pollution is here and now, immediate. Your children are affected by it. And by the way, pollution is now the biggest killer of people on planet Earth. 7 million people are dying prematurely because of pollution. But if we stop pollution, or reduce pollution, we will also do very, very good for climate. So we want to bring these two agendas together as one. And that's a very strong Asian agenda, because the most polluted cities most of them are in Asia. But it's also in Africa and Europe and everywhere else.
I mean, it's not just the air pollution, but it seas, our rivers, and our ground. I mean, what would be the main strategies that that would work with very clear results when it comes to combating pollution, particularly in countries like Indonesia? It's an archipelago, and we are surrounded, and we have lots of polluted rivers, and our seas are also not in good shape.
Well, if you for a moment just focus on air pollution, it would be to move from coal into solar and all the other renewables. It would be to move from petrol-based vehicles or motorbikes into electrical motorbikes or electrical vehicles. And it will be to establish rapid transport systems. I mean, in Beijing and Shanghai, they are now building 100 kilometers of metro every year.
We're trying to do that now in Jakarta.
So
it's taking a long time.
But it shows how fast change can happen. If that can happen in China, for sure it can also happen in Indonesia. If the Chinese can roll out railroad at a speed no one had done previously in human history, because you can make a rapid high-speed system from, say, Jakarta to Surabaya, where there's such a huge population, so well prepared for high-speed rail. So when change can happen so fast in China, it can also happen in Indonesia and so many places.
Well, China is a bit different, because it's more centralized, and they can, the lead in terms of getting things done, implementing with the leadership in China, they can do that. Here in Indonesia, we need a democracy where everybody gets their own say. It does take a while, and it does.
Whenever I point to how fast things happen in China, people say, "Oh, it's so different there." No, I mean. When these changes started in China in the 1980s, no one predicted that it could happen in China. And it's not just in China. I mean, Indonesia in itself has had enormous change. In the 1960s, life expectancy in Indonesia was in the 40s. Now it's 71. The economic and social development of Indonesia itself has been fabulous. It has been also a stable democracy. First time I came here, there was civil.
When was that?
That was in 1999, just after the fall of Suharto. At the time, there was civil war in Aceh. There was conflicts in Sulawesi, and a number of problems in the Moluccans. East Timor was on the verge of separation, and so many people said, "Oh, Indonesia is doomed. It can never work." You pull it together under good leadership and has surged ahead. And if Indonesia can develop that fast, for sure Indonesia can also rapidly change on environment.
There's also this, Indonesia, we have a target of increasing our renewables to 23% by 2025. Unfortunately, even now it's still less than 5%. Well, the argument is always, if we go renewable, if we, come up with one, because we're so used to using our fossil fuels, whether it's oil or coal. The argument is, it's so expensive to invest in renewables. And how do you get companies to actually be much more willing and incentivized to come up with, more renewable energy, especially when the price of commodities is quite low at the moment? So the incentive to use fossil fuel is still there, very big.
In every system, everywhere in the world, there is a resistance to change. People want to stick to their old habits, and of course there are many entrenched interests who want to continue with the fossil fuel economy. But change is happening very fast. Prices coming down at a speed no one thought possible. Chile in South America just recently had an auction where solar energy were much more competitive than any other source of fuel, and at a very, very low cost. And of course Indonesia still have some areas, say in Papua, where people are not connected to the grid, where they don't have electricity in the villages. These are very well suited for off-grid solar systems. And in the more developed parts of Indonesia, say in Java, large-scale solar, which you now see in Morocco, you see it in Dubai, you see it in India, has an enormous potential for low-cost energy to people. And change is happening much faster than people think was possible.
What do you think are there any best practices that you see, particularly when it comes to farming with very, for example, the meat industry, the beef industry, the cattle industry? I mean, this type of industries are the one that produces, that uses up a lot of energy and also produces a lot of methane. Is there any way that in the future that we have to basically change the way we consume, the way we do business, the way we live, and the way we travel? Do you see that on the global level there is that kind of awareness beginning to grow in people?
I think there is no doubt that we cannot consume more and more meat, all 7, soon to be 9 million people on the planet. However, I think that the main change is to get more out of less. To make sure that we can have economic growth, but without increased emissions. In my nation, Norway, to bring that example, we have had a doubling of the economy in the last 2 decades. So it shows it's possible to have economic growth without increased emission. We have not done the trick yet. No one has done it when it comes to climate emissions. But for basically every other emission, you can have more with less.
Eric,
and of course we need to go into circular economy where we try to reuse things. I mean, we are producing more and more, say, cellular phones, more and more cars, but nearly every component in the cellular phone or in the car can be reused, either in its present form or melted and put into use again.
The Scandinavia is a very good example of, I mean, everything in Scandinavia really, works well. They have, the green cities, the smart city, and everything's sort of environmentally friendly. But then you have, countries like Indonesia, huge population, and we need to grow. We need to create employment. At the same time, but we are the most vulnerable if there's climate change.
No need to go as far as to Scandinavia to see examples. I know that not all Indonesians are happy if I bring up Singapore as a shining example, but Singapore was the first city in the entire world where Lee Kuan Yew, the leader, said that it's not in the Human Rights Declaration of the UN that you should be allowed to take your car and go into the city center without bringing other people into the car or without paying something. So Singapore started regulating traffic in Singapore at a time when it happened nowhere else. Lee Kuan Yew also said that we have a beautiful river in Singapore, You cannot put your polluting industry at that river. Please go away. You cannot do pig farming even at the river because we need a clean river. So everyone knows of the fantastic economic development in Singapore, but it's also a fantastic success story when it comes to environment. And as I told you, 2 days back I was in the southern Chinese city of Shenzhen. Shenzhen is now at an economic level of Spain. The size of the city is the same population as Belgium or South Sudan, so it's not that small. Shenzhen is fantastically green. They have any number of beautiful new buildings, new art museum, new library.
So what do you see in Shenzhen that's different from other parts of China?
You see leaders who want to change, want economic prosperity, but want at the same time to make a very lively green city. They have the ambition that 50% of the city shall be parks in the very near future. So it's all about setting the right direction.
So leadership is very important as a driver, and also to come up with sound policies. But
leadership is number one. Whether it's politics or business or in the local communities, if you have good leaders, you can achieve nearly everything. If you are blessed with horrible, brutal idiots as leaders,
we're beginning to see more and more of those types of leaders coming on. Eric,
unfortunately, you have had two great, in my view, two fantastic presidents. First Desi Anwar, now Jokowi. So Indonesia has been blessed with good leaders.
Yeah, but on a global scale, there is this sort of tendency of
we have some very bad leaders, some very bad leaders also.
So what do you see as the biggest threat at the moment to the planet and to efforts for us to combat climate change and reduce emission? Especially we see what's happening in the European Union, the Brexit, and then the Trump presidency, and also the conflicts. There's never-ending conflicts in the Middle East. And to compound that, we're seeing more and more in terms of natural disasters. We just had one in Aceh, for example. That also impact negatively on the environment, obviously, when these disasters happen. What do you see as
the biggest threat to me is tensions between the main powers of the world. As long as, for instance, United States of America and China, which are the two main powers in the world in our epoch, so as long as they can work together, there's hardly any limit to what we can achieve. And they also need to work with India, Indonesia, Europe, others. But as long as the big powers we can work together, we can resolve every problem. If we start with the attitude of some politicians that, I'm myself, I just look into my nation, I reduce trade, I create tensions with other nations to get
Which
more,
is the message
votes.
that we're getting, more and more.
There are some definitely concerning issues, but I'm still confident that we need to stand up. We need to tell people that the most important word in today's world, that is together. Only together we can resolve problems.
How about Europe? Can Europe take, for example, say the US says, no, that's not our priority. We just want to focus on, protecting ourselves and building walls and, doing what's good to make our country great. Never mind your part of the world. Where do you see Europe coming into it?
We will, of course, engage with the United States, with the Trump administration, with the view that we want your leadership, we want the United States to play a key role at the global scene. If that for some reason were not to happen, well, then we are dependent on European leadership, of Chinese leadership, Indonesian leadership. We will depend on others. But the rest of the world together will be able to resolve it if the United States were to withdraw. But I'm still confident that we will see a United States which will play a positive role in the global system.
Now the UN now has a new Secretary General, and new global problems, obviously, and if, for example, there's less sort of interest in the UN, how do you see the role of the UN itself, particularly the UN EP, when there is sort of less vested interest, particularly by countries like the United States. I mean, they mentioned that, you know, we're not going to pay our dues, for example. How would that affect the efficacy and also the influence of the United Nations when it comes to getting, you know, these policies or these programs going?
The number one role of the United Nations is to inspire people to act for the environment, to inspire people to set policies which gets people out of poverty, and to inspire people to go for peace and work together. And I know that this is the vision of the new Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. He got, by the way, this position just because he was seen as the best candidate. There was nothing behind the scene. He put this program forward, and he convinced people that he was the best. So it's a fantastic start for a new Secretary General. He should inspire us, and the rest of us will do our utmost also to try to inspire, because inspired people can achieve a lot.
And funding itself for the UNEP, how will that? How do you see the sustainability of UNEP? What is the biggest obstacles that you see?
If you speak to the finances of the UN, I mean, I have two main visions. I want to see if we can get more finances from the middle-income countries. There are some very poor countries, mainly in Africa. You cannot expect to really provide resources. But you have a huge number now of successful middle-income countries, the Chinas, the Malaysias, the Indonesias, the Vietnams of this world, who can provide some resources to the UN. And we want to tap into that. That will be to devise joint programs with these nations as to how we can together change the world. And we want to work more with business. It's not that we believe business should put money into a hat to the UN. They will not do that. But let's work with business into how we can transform the plastic economy of this world so we get less plastic, how we can transform the way we see landscapes so that we get more investment into landscapes and forest protection. Let's look into how we can stop the horrendous pollutions of the oceans, working with the big shipping industry. So joint programs with business will also be a way of getting more resources and also more technology and outreach.
But is there that excitement you feel, you know, with a UNEP? I mean, obviously you sort of go from country to country and you work closely with governments. What's what sense of, you know, sort of excitement or the partnership with UN particularly? I know you've been executive director for what, since May? Like, it's not even a year yet. What's your own what's your sense so far? I mean, how difficult is it to get everybody on board or getting excited about implementing these programs?
I see a lot of excitement, particularly with this private sector focus, this citizen focus. I mean, you need to inspire people to act. There are some amazing people out there. Let me give you one example. In the city of Mumbai in India, a young lawyer looked out of his window, from the 10th floor. He saw this horrendous plastic pollution at the beaches there. He did not think, oh, how can I get the government to resolve this problem for me? He started speaking to his neighbors, how can we resolve this? And they started picking up plastic. They now pick plastic for 1 year, every Sunday, many Saturdays, and there's any number of plastic which has come up. And then, of course, government and others are come in to help. So this engagement of citizens and the power of business is so inspiring forces for change.
But are you bringing any new sort of innovations, new strategy when it comes to, you know, heading UNEP, Eric? I mean, how are you doing things differently? One of them is to change language, because, I mean, frankly, I mean, to be very frank, the UN has so often tried to bore people into action. Yes, and the impression is very bureaucratic as well.
So bureaucratic, so boring. I speak from a cough everywhere, wherever I come. So let's speak a plain language that appeals to people's guts, people's heart, and to people's brain.
Any personal target or any institutional target that you yourself have set that I must achieve this, say, by after 100 days or 1 year or until the end of your tenure? Do you have any
I have some
that
main
too.
targets. We should substantially reduce the pollution so that people can breathe in Jakarta or Beijing or Delhi in a much fresher atmosphere. We should protect the most iconic animals on this planet, the orangutans of Sumatra.
Yeah, and also the giraffes and the
Kalimantan.
elephants are apparently on the verge
Elephant
of
population is coming down. But I've just also saw a very inspiring example of the opposite, which is the pandas of China. There is now rapidly increasing the panda population because of very, very deliberate science-based programs to protect the pandas. So it can be done. Poor African nation, Rwanda, has had enormous success in protecting their gorillas, which are somewhat similar to the orangutans here. Why? Well, they have made this national park such attractive to tourists that they make any amount of money. Every gorilla of Rwanda is worth $1 million in tourist income. And what that means is, of course, that the people around the park is the biggest protectors of the gorillas because they want this income from tourism, from hotels and taxi driving or whatever.
Okay, finally, Eric, do you enjoy your position? I mean, what keeps you awake at night? What sort of gets you sort of frustrated or annoyed, or what?
What keeps me awake at night is the very simple fact that I go to bed very late and get up very early because I'm working hard and also try to spend some time with my family.
Is it very challenging, though, as a whole?
If I'm awake at night on these matters, it will be because time is short. We are in a hurry. We are in a hurry if we really want to protect the orangutans or the elephants or the gorillas. We are in a hurry if we want to make the change happening to avoid very damaging climate change. We can do all this. We have the technology. But we need to provide the leadership for that to happen. But I have, for myself, perfect job. I have no complaints. There's any number of fantastic, good, inspiring people to work with. So have a good time.
Okay, well, thank you so much for talking to us. And let's hope all our targets, very ambitious targets, can be met. I mean, in the meantime, the sea level is continually rising. So it's important for us to have that implementation going sooner rather than later. Once again, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.